All right. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Better late than never here on the Bruja Report. Hi, my name's Evie, and I wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit more about cults, kind of digging into more what I went over in my newsletter and in some previous posts, and then debunk some myths about Tantra, because Tantra is one of the coolest and oldest practices. It's kind of like the most poetic incarnation of the oneness teachings, and it's very formulaic, like there's an actual path that you can take with it. And I'm a big fan of secretive religions. I'm a huge fan of secretive religions, so like the Orisha based religions, the Kabbalah, which isn't really something that I fuck with so much, but I like researching it, the Gnostic Gospels, basically anything where you have to learn from a teacher directly. And Tantra is definitely one of those. But things like the Tao Te Ching, the Tantra is basically it's oneness teachings. So actually the Tao Te Ching is a tantric text. A lot of the Vedas point in that direction. And it's just a really beautiful, it's adopting the mentality of like, why do you think this shouldn't be happening? Work it in. And there's a lot of really beautiful ways that like sex can illustrate that. But this idea that tantric yoga is just like a free-for-all, and you go, like ashrams in India have been fucked up for a really long time, since like the 90s, Rishikesh, people are like, oh, I'm going to the home of yoga. It's like, yeah, be careful out there, because, anybody can kind of just wake up and call themselves guru, and that's going to be it. And through teachers like Osho, just this kind of hyper-sexualized version of Tantra started becoming a thing where a lot of people are like adopting it. And for me, it's so easy to spot the tantric practitioners. It's like it's like Megan Curry kind of vibes. It's like to like boho, like free love, plant medicine, wine and cigarettes. I'm spiritual, but I like get fucked up too. Not that, well, I kind of just don't believe that you can do God's great work when you're getting fucked up all the time. But this idea of Tantra just being like a free-for-all, especially when it comes to sex, it's just such a misinterpretation. And it really bothers me, because like the true practice of Tantra is really about conserving and condensing that sexual power. And the opposite of that would be just like giving it away. And if you are going to be giving it away, it's got to be completely consensual. But the problem with like, Tantra is like filtered a little bit more into the West, which means there's all these like tantric spin-off ashrams in India. And most of the secrets, they won't really give you unless you go and learn directly from a teacher. And it's not what you're going to be learning in a book. It's like in the little stories that like your teacher tells you on the in-between. So if you want to learn the secrets of Tantra, it's like pretty important that you find a teacher. But finding a good teacher that isn't all just about like the sex is kind of hard in this day and age, because it just seems like the easiest religion. It's like, why wouldn't you pick that? Yeah, you can do whatever the fuck you want. It totally works. Because technically that's right. Like technically you can do whatever you want, but that's on the provision that you're trying to be conscious and aware of everything that you do and the impact that certain substances have on you, and the giving, the conservance of sexual energy, and all of that is so important. And what, I meant to say this, but I'm not exactly sure what sentence you're supposed to fit into. I swear pregnancy brain is like a real thing. I'm like, but when you go to an ashram and you're like, okay, I'm going to study Tantra with a teacher, whether it's in the States, whether it's in India or whatever, you get swept up. And it's so easy to become like elated with spirituality and elated with your own enlightenment, that whatever guru says you do. And, it's just like, and here's, by having this like tantric orgy, you're on like the expedited path to enlightenment and bringing up the vibration of everybody else around you. And it's really tempting to do it then, you leave and you get on a flight back to New York and you're trying to explain, you spent 3 months like pink clouding. You're like, oh my God, it was so awesome. And then, when the dust kind of starts to settle a little bit, you're like, I fucked some people I really wasn't into. I actually like don't feel that good. Or I had sex with my guru, and that's that's something that happens, and it really bothers me to see Tantra expressed in just that like sexual free for all way, because it's really just like the opposite of what it's about. So there's a few different types of Tantra, and like what Osho popularized was something called red Tantra, and like everybody wore red. Kundalini refers to itself as white Tantra. There's also black Tantra, which is the same thing as red Tantra, but it's just like, I love that, we're still using this like black and white magic stuff. But, that's just the lunar solar aphorism. So Kundalini yoga, something that I really like about that, Kundalini yoga is very extreme though. It's like purity, 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 purity. And it can feel very like, to me, it doesn't feel like freedom. And if it doesn't feel like freedom, I don't think that it has, I think that love is freedom. And I think that God is love. So if I'm not feeling free, I'm not really feeling God. And that's just basically how I try to live my life in this day and age. But, you had the kind of die-hard, almost monastic practices of Kundalini yoga, which is all this idea of like hyper purity, super pure mind, wearing all of white clothes, waking up at 3:30 in the morning to be at Aquarian sadhana by 4 o'clock in the morning, and just doing things very, very, very perfectly. And Kundalini loves to talk about how it's like the householder's path, how it's so approachable. And it is approachable because anybody can do a little bit of it, but you don't have to be in it for too long before they kind of start demanding more and more of you. And I personally think that Kundalini yoga gets very, very culty. And the kind of tip off for me about that was hearing a teacher talking about another teacher, and this is a very, very famous teacher, talking about another teacher who had to do Sat Kriya. His guru told him, you got to do Sat Kriya every day for the rest of your life. And Sat Kriya, for those of you that don't know, is, it can be, his duration was 11 minutes, but you take your hands like this, and it's, your hands are up, and you go, Sat Nam, Sat Nam, Sat Nam. And it, after 11 minutes of that, you're ready to kill yourself. After 11 minutes of basically that's how Kundalini yoga works. These like intervals of high intensity, but it teaches you, it's only weird if it doesn't work. But anyway, they were talking about a teacher who'd been prescribed that he had to do Sat Kriya every day for the rest of his life. And they were like making fun of him for it, kind of like, oh yeah, doesn't that suck? And he had been doing it for like 8 years at that point. And I was like, dude, if you've gotten to the point where you don't really have the ages, where other people are making fun of how and this practice is on top of having to wake up and chant long Ekongkars for 2.5 hours every morning and go teach a Kundalini class and attend any extra ones. It's very, very, very demanding. And I didn't like that. People were like, yeah, it's demanding and it sucks and it's ridiculous that you have to do that, but you're in the mentality where you just are agreeing to stuff like that. I think that it's a bit too extreme. But something that Kundalini has lots of things, right? And Kundalini energy, it's not a style of yoga. Kundalini is just a metaphor for the pranic, for the prana, for the energy, for the nectar of life, the essence de vie that lives, that ideally would be traveling up and down your central column, your Sushumna Nadi, the spinal cord, up and down through the chakras. But, there's this idea of Kundalini being asleep and we're trying to wake it up through these practices. But the Kundalini is the life force, the life force energy, and that's never asleep. We're just asleep to that idea. But Kundalini is, I've heard lots of people throwing this term around, and it's because you can. It's forever. Kundalini energy, creative energy, source energy, Kundalini awakening, third eye awakening, bipolar meltdown, whatever. We're all pointing at the same things here. But Kundalini has, and I think that in a way it grew in retaliation to, as Tantra was becoming more and more unboundaried with so many different expressions of it, and people being like, yeah, do whatever you want. And Kundalini was like, well, look, we have to keep these secrets preserved. So let's do the opposite. Let's make it as regimented as possible, as strict as possible. Let's keep it as closed off as possible. And for a long time, it was very secret until Yogi Bhajan brought it to the West. And Yogi Bhajan's a really interesting character. He said a lot of things. If you have Kundalini friends, he'll always be like, well, Yogi Bhajan says, and Yogi Bhajan says. It's like, yeah, Yogi Bhajan says some things that are like really profound and says other things that you're just like, what? But Kundalini heads get real, no matter what. They're like, oh, Yogi Bhajan says United Sex Allergy for USA. And I'm like, that's like not even that good. And Yogi Bhajan, if you guys have had yogi teas, that's a Kundalini. That's Yogi Bhajan's company. So, you've got these two, and like neither of them, because Tantra, the way that like I've learned it, and the way that I learn things isn't, by taking a course and just, being, oh, now I've got this diploma for that. It's really just like sitting with concepts for a really, really long time and just chewing on them and be like, does this does this correspond with everything that I believe in? How is this interpreted in other religions that I think are useful? Does this contradict stuff that I've learned in A Course in Miracles? Does this contradict the Tao Te Ching? Is it saying the same thing? Are there, like how could I explain, for me, it's never enough to just have one religion be it. I'm very interested in I'm interested in all religions, but they're all saying the same things. And before I'll start sharing something or even really accepting it into my own life, I have to run it through like all of these filters to make sure that it checks out. It can't have one shred of chosen ones. If there's one single tiny little speck grain of we're the chosen ones, close the book and walk away. Because if you haven't gotten to the point in your spiritual practices where you realize that we're all equal and that everybody's a reflection of you, you have yet to get there. And until you get there, I don't feel like I don't have anything to learn from a religion that has a superiority complex, because that's just not the way that the world works. Sorry, I don't care if that's how you feel. That's just not the way that the world works. But I feel like there's these two expressions of Tantra that just seem so extreme and actually both like very culty, but the teachers that are Tantra teachers, like you'll never know that they are, because it's very, very secretive. And it's this beautiful like union between the two. Osho says Tantra is saying yes. Kundalini says Tantra is saying no. But there's this beautiful medium in between the two, and that's what I know Tantra to be. And so, you really have to understand what sex is. Like, sex is so important. It is the greatest gift. It's what people, in the Bible stories, the Garden of Good and Needles, the Garden of Good and Evil, the apple of knowledge, which some people translate as being desire. And this idea that like once Eve ate the apple of desire is the root of all suffering, because you think that there's something that you want and it's not here yet. And the waiting becomes excruciating. And, the Bible, and that's just, from like the kind of Gnostic version of it. But it's when sex has the potential to create life, and your semen, actually Yogi Bhajan says that 90% of the illnesses you have are because you have weak semen. Your semen, and women, we have semen too. It gets concentrated when you're not just getting rid of it all the time. And this is like your sense of vitality, your golden, in Kundalini, they call it the ojas. And it's beautiful. You can actually like see it in people's skin. When you meet those like old couples that are just like good looking, and their skin is like radiant and their eyes are bright and they're like vital and they've got like good, like that's, that's Tantra. That's what strong semen looks like. And you just plain and simple don't get strong semen if you're, blowing your load all over the place and with any old person. So this is also the potential to like create life. It's also the potential to create like extreme pleasure. And there's peaks and valleys in life, and we kind of tend to go for the peak orgasms. We want this, and you guys know what I'm talking about, hopefully. But there's also valleys, there's natural dips in life, and that we get this idea in sex of like going for the goal, like orgasm is the goal, orgasm is the goal. This is bringing me closer to orgasm. This is bringing me further away from it. And we don't give it nearly as much time as it deserves. But not only that, it's the perfect way to realize the combination of masculine and feminine energy. And you don't have to have a penis and a vagina to create masculine and feminine energy whatsoever. But it's this idea of, we're always trying to balance our masculine and feminine energy. So what better way to be able to actually see the magic that's possible when we take these two opposing forces and unite them than by actually joining masculine and feminine energy in sacred tantric sex. It's beautiful, but there's not a lot of like tantra is not fucking all the time and like sexual acrobatics. Like it's not that at all. It's a practice of like total reverence around sex and really building something up and making everything pleasurable and the whole thing being this like united experience with the goal of making you one with everything around you. So when you realize when you can become one with another person and not just like, but really cultivating something, really meditating something, breathing and being present in all of this, you realize that you can become one with the other. And when you can become one with another, you can become one with everything. And what's, like, why would we want to be one with everything? Because if we're all on the same side, nothing can ever be against you. And that's what I really feel. And let me get my pen. I got to write that down because I was meaning to write that here. You guys can come with me while I get a pen. Sorry for the Bruja report that's being filmed on my laptop. Absent version. But that's the point of wanting to be one with everything, is that if we're on the same side, nothing can be against you. And so it's very easy to visualize that using sex. So that's where people get this idea that like Tantra is tantric sex, but it's so much more than that. Let me just write this down. Why would you want to be one with everything? Great. So that's where, the correlation between Tantra and tantric sex comes from. But it's a lot more about reserving it and building it up than just having, like getting a group of people together so you can all have 60-minute orgasms. It doesn't work like that. That'll wind up with you feeling really sick. Some people need a lot more sex than others, but as a general rule of thumb, we could all hold it in a lot more. Like masturbate your friggin' face off, explore all kinds of things that you want, but understand that there's a real serious transmission of energy that happens with sex that isn't something to take lightly. And a really interesting perspective on this is actually, my brother sent me this documentary. It was amazing. It's called Sex, the Gateway to Eden, I believe, and it's a documentary about Gnosticism, but it's really interesting perspectives on sexuality, and you should definitely check that out. It's on YouTube. So there's if tantric sex isn't tantra, what is? And this is what I want to explain to you guys, because instead of, I had a client that was asking me, hey, can you give me my client, I can save my clients a lot of times. So I'll be like, sure, I'll just like break all of this down for you in one session. But if tantric sex isn't tantra, what is? And so tantra is called, tantra means the loom, and Loom, and that's what you weave on. So I want you to imagine that you have like a big loom in front of you, and that this loom is your life. And so how looms work is, you get a thread and you weave it in between the other threads, and then you comb it down, and you literally make a fabric one thread at a time by weaving the thread through, pulling it down. And, with this thread, like at the time when Tantra was becoming a word, the thread was really uneven. It's like when you're dealing with homespun wool, there's going to be some parts that are, if you guys like knit, there's some parts that are thicker than others. There's a Bruja report, so I know we've got like stitch and bitchers in here. I know there's some embroider. I know there's some crocheters, embroiderers. But when you're dealing with, hand spun wool, it will have all these different kind of textures and pieces in it. So like I said, with sex, we're convinced that there's this pleasure point that we're trying to get to, right? That this is what pleasure is. And this is, how they say desire is the root of all suffering. So let's say like in a sexual metaphor, we would be like, this is desirable. And I'm either getting closer to this or further away from this. So he's going down on me. I'm really enjoying it. Yes, that's working. That's getting me closer to the whole point of why I think I'm here, which is pleasure. That, on the other hand, is getting me further away from it. And in sex, we can't really be present with just the experience of it being what it is, because we're trying so hard to get to orgasm, peak orgasm, not valley orgasm being just like instead of having 30 seconds at a 10, having like 60 minutes at a 5, and being able to find the pleasure in that, and that's really something to experiment with if you haven't had it before. Like a lot of us fuck when what we really want is intimacy. And if there's one complaint I hear, like doing couples counseling, is like people miss the making out so much. They're like, I just miss making out. Now we're always, it's like just straight to fucking. And it's like, just stop fucking for a little bit. But we associate so much of a healthy relationship with frequency of sex. And that's kind of a mindset you might want to shake out a little bit. Like, guys get fucking tired from blowing their loads all the time. And, we see this as it being like the downfall of the relationship when you're not constantly like ripping each other's clothes off. And that's just not really sustainable. Like, especially if it's a man that's over 40, that you really don't want to ejaculate more than twice a month. And I know that might seem like, but Mr. Gray was fucking all the time. And, you kind of want to rope it back a little bit, because that's when you start getting sick. But this idea, so, and so like sex is actually really such a useful place to practice Tantra, because all of these things make such sense, when you think about balancing the energies, getting to, closer to or further away from a pleasure point. Like Tantra is about just like deleting the idea of a pleasure point and come to see all things as being pleasurable. So we do the same exact thing in life too. We're saying, okay, well, this is the goal that I have, pleasure. This is getting me closer to it. This is getting me further away from it. So it's still like our plan. And we're constantly worried about like pissing off God, because we think, ideally we'll all think in terms of oneness. Law of one, Tantra, the Tao Te Ching, this idea of being one with everything because nothing can be against us. But when we're in a mindset of duality, which is saying that God basically has two sides, one that likes me and one that doesn't, when we're trying to get to this pleasure point that we've determined as the focal point of our lives, and things start going wrong, we all of a sudden call in other God, God too. And we're like, oh, we must have gotten this version of God. I'm being punished and I'm being taken away from my pleasure point. So we're always feeling like we're in this balance of getting either closer to or further away from our goal. And that's something that we're doing, and that we're being punished by a dualistic God. And that's just not the way that it works. So if we could take away this idea that if we could take away this focal point of pleasure just being like the end all be all for our life, then this doesn't mean you're going to have a shitty life at all. This means you're going to have a much better life, because you'll be able to go with the ebbs and flows of it instead of taking everything so damn personally. But in the sexual arena, Tantra would say like, well, what if you could appreciate everything for exactly what it is? What if you could appreciate a little good head with a little bad head for exactly what it is, for the experience of intimacy that you're having with somebody, for the fact that even if he's not going, he's doing it badly, but he's doing it gladly. What if you could just enjoy this experience for exactly what it was, instead of being like, I've got to have an orgasm, I've got to have an orgasm, I've got to have an orgasm. And if you take the same mentality and apply it to life, it's like, well, why the fuck are you so sure that all of this shouldn't be happening? You're absolutely determined that we have to get to this goal, I have to have this job, otherwise I won't be happy. I have to have this pay, otherwise I won't be happy, and any time that we're not getting what we want, we think that we're being punished. And this is just responsible for so much suffering in life. So the idea is like, when you're weaving something together on a loom, it doesn't always look perfect. It doesn't always look like it's supposed to be. But when you step back and you see the thing as a completed project, you're like, wow, it's beautiful. But, if you were weaving something and you get this like ugly piece of the yarn and you're like, oh shit, this is going to like fuck up the whole look of my life, this like tapestry of my life, if I have this ugly piece of thread in there. And this is the way that we view our mistakes. Fuck, I fucked it up. This isn't going to work with the plan of things. I've ruined it. I want to walk away. No, you just keep on going. Instead of trying to like, just work it into the story. If he's going down on you badly, just work it into the story. Work it into the like greater experience of the sex. With your mistakes of life, don't spend forever looking, oh, this shitty piece of yarn, I ruined the whole tapestry. Just work it in. Just work it in. What if you could never make a wrong turn? What if everything was pleasurable? What if this tapestry could only get more beautiful with time? And I love this idea of it goes along with the Tao, the Tao of things, this perpetual motion towards beauty, every day a little bit better. What if every day you got a little bit better? No matter how bad you thought that you were at all these different things, no matter how much you thought you fucked it up, or what you did last weekend, or what you did last summer, or whatever the fuck. What if you had never made a mistake? What if every single knot in that ball of yarn that you're weaving with, what if every single one of those knots and those imperfections was put there divinely to get you to an end result that was so beautiful? What if we could stop chasing chronic instant gratification, this just like obsession with having instant gratification, and just see everything as a sign that like what we want wants us to? What if we could just stop thinking that we were constantly getting closer to or further away from pleasure, instead of just trying to like measure, how am I doing? What if we could just enjoy the whole ride, the peaks and the valleys? And that's really like if you take one thing from this, take this idea of what if you couldn't ever make a wrong turn? What if you've never made a wrong turn? What if there was nothing that needed to change? What if it was just perfect exactly the way that it was? And if you can really chew on this concept, you don't really need to go and study all the fucking tantric stuff, or go spend 7 years in an ashram drinking wine on a bearskin rug with a really ugly guy that you're going to have sex with, or a really ugly lady that but you can sign up in Tantra, you can sign up for a lot of not totally consensual sex because you were so elated in that time that you didn't realize that you weren't really, making calls that reflected how you felt on the inside. And, if you can just chew on this idea of like what Tantra is, like instead of trying to get all the words and everything right and all the books right and, sitting in that like couple's lotus thing, trying to get it right, what if you could just contemplate this idea of your life being a tapestry that you're weaving every single day, of your life being a beautiful tapestry that you're weaving every single day, and that even if some days look a little worse than others, even if some days you've gotten something that was, a big chunk in your yarn and you're like, oh, this is such an ugly looking day that I wove today. What if when you step back and like think of the like Navajo blankets and stuff like that are all naughty and ruddy, and sometimes you just have it's the imperfections are really what make it. And you might not be able to see that on that day where you're just judging yourself so much for not being as perfect as the day before, as perfect as you thought that you might be. But what if when you stepped out, when you thought, once it worked itself in to the layers of life, it became your favorite part? And this is something that you should really think about if you're single and not wanting to be, you have all of these things that you're constantly holding against yourself, these flaws that you think are your biggest deal breakers, why somebody would not want to date you. And what if those were your greatest assets? What if those were your greatest assets? Because I'm telling you right now, they are. They are. And the only one that thinks they're disgusting and unlovable is you. But what if the fact that you talk a lot was something that your partner loved the most about you? What if your chunky legs, your chunky cellulite legs were your partner's favorite thing about you? What if what you thought were your biggest flaws were your greatest assets? Because they are. It's just you don't see it like that. And you're hoping that somebody's going to come along and just alert you to the fact that you're lovable. But it doesn't work like that, because someone can't love you until you love you. It just doesn't work like that. If you don't love you and you've got somebody there saying, I love you, I love you, I love you all the time, you're going to be that person that's always asking why, and then like not even really listening when they say why. And women that have been hurt a lot in relationships, and men that have been hurt a lot in relationships, will always ask like, why do you love me? And you need to answer your own, because the person that you need to hear that answer from is actually you. So you look at what you think are your biggest detriments as a person and just love them, love them, love them. Come to see them as lovable qualities in yourself. Or adjust them if they're, if you're like disgusted, can't look at yourself in the mirror when you're, after you've been out drinking all night because you're like, oh, I hate who I am, then, adjust that. You don't have to. Nobody's making you go out drinking all night. And it's actually like easier to love yourself when you're feeling good and when your head's on totally straight. But, you have to be the person that loves yourself first. So really, what do you think are your biggest faults? They're actually your greatest assets. And just, look up a picture of a loom. If you're not totally clear on how a loom works, I can't wait to get one for my house, by the way. I'm going to put it huge on this wall over here. But let it be beautiful. Your life is beautiful. You've never made a wrong turn. And it's just this criticism, this constant self-criticism, because you think like every day you're getting a little bit better. Every day you're getting closer to your goals. Every day you become a little slower to react. You become a little softer, a little bit wiser, a little bit more loving, a little bit more joyful, a little bit more self-aware. Every single day, even those like habits that you're so fucking hard on yourself about, every day that you become conscious of them, every day that you feel bad about like going out and you fucked up on, well, don't feel bad about yourself, because you're so much less likely, you're so much less likely to do it again. Every time every time you get in that destructive pattern, you're like, oh, fuck, well, your days with it are numbered. You're conscious, you're aware that you've got a problem, you're aware that you've got something that needs to be adjusted, and every single, soon it won't be a part of your life at all anymore. It won't be. You came here to expand. You came here to learn lessons. Stop being so hard on yourself. Every single day, you're getting a little bit better. This is the Tao of things. This is the flow of things. We're all on the same exact side. There is nothing against you. There's nothing you need to defend yourself against. You are one with all things. And you can't make a wrong turn. So if you can really, you can save yourself a lot of time going through. People are really hard on themselves about weed. I know, because I'm really hard on myself about weed. And for real, every single time that I run out of weed, I'm like, Spirit, you're going to have to give me a fucking sign if I'm supposed to be smoking this anymore or not. And sometimes I won't have weed for months. Other times my landlord will give me a fucking, I'm like, Spirit, what am I supposed to be doing right now? My landlord, not my landlord, my real estate agent gave me a pound of weed. A pound of weed. I was like, holy shit. But that's the thing, is like Tantra says anything goes. So in the same mentality of like, okay, well, you can't make a wrong turn, anything goes. You have to be a cognizant enough person to know your boundaries. And I'm going to give you one example of this. I have some, there was a teacher who I really, really loved who taught Tantra. And just taught Tantra in a really, very, very sexually oriented. But she wrote for like Playboy and Cosmo, and she had these great videos. Her name was Salma Sidora, and she was an amazing, amazing, amazing teacher, and knew so much about Tantra. Had a beautiful message that she was sharing with the world, but she couldn't stop drinking. She couldn't stop drinking. Like, yeah, she was fabulous, red wine drinker, but she killed herself. And the problem with that, like killing yourself, it's hard. I recently had a friend who killed themselves, and I've been trying not to think too much about how I feel about like suicide and how that works on a karmic level. When you die, everything is forgiven, but it's very, if you go and rent a car, the body that you're in is the car that you're in for life. So it's the same as going to like a rental car dealership, and they're like, oh, cool, well, you've been driving like crappy cars, but very well for the last, 10 incarnations. So we're going to give you a Maserati. And you're like, great, you get to drive through this life at a Maserati. And, but if you don't take good care of that car, if you drive it drunk, if you're not, if you're speeding, if you're not taking, if you forget that this is a rental, like we're very lucky. We're at the very top of the food chain. If you want to learn lessons, you'll be able to learn lessons much faster in a human body, because we create such an impact, especially now when your voice matters. So, even though the second you get to the rental car dealership, even if you total your car, if you destroy it, you purposely drive it off a cliff, they'll be like, look, it's all good. It's not like you're going to go to jail or anything like that. But the next time you come around and you want to rent a car, we're not going to give you a Maserati again. You might have to go through a couple other, you might have to drive a few beaters around for a little bit before you're allowed to work up to this level again. And so, when you kill yourself also as a spiritual, our work, our art, the teaching spiritual concepts is my art. That's my creative gift. That's what I came here to do. That's my I am presence. That's how God expresses itself in me. And and as a result, because I've chosen to do this for my life path, I'll have everything that I need on the way, because that's what happens when you live your dharma. And just recognize your creative gifts and share them, and you'll have everything. It won't be easy, but the problem is like that was also her line of work. And when you're a life coach and you kill yourself, it kind of like negates all of your work, because people don't really want to take life advice from somebody who killed themselves. And it made me really sad, because I'm like, I see this happening all the time, where people get really like lost in the sauce with Tantra, because technically you can do everything. You're not going to hit a single no in Tantra yoga, in black and red Tantra. You're not going to hit a single no in that, because they're like, no, it's free for all. And it's the loom, just work it all in, no bad days. And it's true, but you really do need, that wasn't written for this day and age, when there were so many things that you could get fucked up on. And it's really important that, if you are saying yes to everything, that you have a few hard lines with yourself, where you're like, look, I don't do that because this repetitive action does not make me happy. And, and having all of this sex doesn't make me happy. Like, you have to have a certain amount of that, almost, asceticism, where you're like, it takes discipline. You can't just go drinking everything, fucking everything, snorting everything, and expect to have a happy life, because you're giving away all of your energy. You're giving your energy away faster than you can build it back up. And I can't stress the importance of being more conscious about the way that you share your sex with people, especially as a woman, because we absorb so much of that energy. And, there's going on regular practices, even if it's just while you're on your period, of being like, this is the time where I'm in the peak of my strength. This is where I'm literally bleeding and not dying. I am woman. Like, this is me in all my holiness. At least take that as a time to not be having sex with people, even though I know it feels good. But see what happens to your creativity when you're not having sex. And not having sex, but like being engaged in like high octane text, in DM boyfriends, DM girlfriends and stuff like that. You're really still, like spraying your energy all over the place. Take a little bit of time, loan yourself to others, but give yourself to yourself. And giving yourself these, like practices, even if it's just while you're on your period, or when you're, just take a little bit of time out to just kind of recollect and see what happens to your vitality when you're saving that. There's also a really beautiful way that like the bandhas work, if you guys are into, teaching yoga, this idea of, in yoga, visibly from the outside, we are, it's like, okay, I'm in warrior 2 pose. So all of my energy is in the architecture of this pose. So that's the energy that you're giving to the world, right? The energy of your muscles, the energy of the architecture of things. This is my energetic expenditure that you can see. But the bandhas are these little locks, these little energetic locks. And that's really you holding on to some energy for yourself, your own self-sustaining energy. It's not going out there, it's not dedicated to anybody else, it's just you for you. And that was actually taught to me by a really fabulous yoga teacher who teaches Tantra, and his name is Rod Stryker, and he's amazing. He's like just one of the best goddamn teachers I've ever known. He started something called Para Yoga, and go and look at pictures of that guy. His name's R.O.D. Stryker, Stryker. That guy, so that's what sexual conservancy looks like. You old, but you hot as fuck. Your eyes are bright. Your semen is strong. Your skin is like glowing. You're like not, like soft Iyengar yoga body, but you're like you look fucking good. You look like sex. That's what happens when you're not like just fucking everybody. You can see when people are a bit more like reserved about who they allow into their space. It's very sexual because that energy, that sexual energy is just like that ojas is just like percolating in them, percolating in them, just like, and you can smell it and you can see it and you want it. You don't get that kind of proud. You don't get that kind of, I don't even know how to say it. From weak semen. You're going to want to keep your semen strong. So there's got to be some natural boundaries in place with Tantra yoga. You have to have them because it's so easy and it's so tempting. It's so easy. Tantra yoga, black and red Tantra yoga seems so easy. It's like, well, just do whatever you want all the time. And that's true, just follow your joy, but also be very diagnostic with yourself about when something isn't really bringing you joy, and being okay with, instant gratification is happiness, but perpetual bliss is joy. And we're going for perpetual bliss over instant gratification. So I understand that there might be like some practices or vices or whatever that you're like, this is me following my joy. It's me following my joy, whatever, it makes me happy. And it's like, it might make you happy for 2 hours tonight, but does it make you sad for 3 days afterwards? Because that's what you really want to be examining is being okay with letting things go when they're truly not making you happy anymore. So that's my little rundown on Tantra misconceptions. I could go into cults and cult, methodology and mentality and stuff, but it's such a big topic. And I truthfully can get a little bit ranty when I'm talking about cults. And especially if I start getting really ranty, then I'm going to start like dropping names of like teachers that I think are starting cults, which means then I'm going to worry that might happen to me one day. And honestly, I'm too much of a loose cannon at 30 years old to talk about how not to join a cult on live. It's something that I have to do in words where I can be like, nope, delete that. Nope, forgive your mom about that. Nope. It's still a pretty volatile topic for me, but I did write about it a little bit in the newsletter, and whatever I resist will persist. So me resisting anybody that's ever started a cult in their life means that I'm always having to make sure that I don't start a cult, because I don't think that anybody starts a cult intentionally. But luckily, I'm not one of those teachers who, I was a bartender for a long time. I don't really like community, I don't really like group activities, stuff like that. A Bruja Report meetup is probably not going to be in the cards. Like, I like being by the fuck myself. I like not really, and I grew up like, I've already done that. I've already lived in a cult. I've already lived in a commune. I've already seen, I'm so happy to see people making friends and stuff on here, because it's just such an exquisite group of people on this account. It's just, when you prioritize your spiritual growth enough to pay $11.11 for something that everybody else gives away for free, and to do the work and to show up on broadcasts like these and really try and like integrate what it is that you're learning, it's like you have such a big, healthy thing in common with other people on here. And like, there's nothing, it's so nice to have friends that are spiritual running mates, for you to be able to just have friends where the conversation is constantly uplifting, especially with all the input that we're always taking. And it's really nice to be able to know that there's like-minded people. Are we all going to move to Utah and live in a city together? Absolutely not. If you guys have criticism, or like negative comments, like, I will never delete those, because that's, I think, the greatest step to starting a cult, is not being able to handle like opposing thoughts, or it's like, just for the positivity of my Facebook group, I just felt like it was in alignment with me to delete that comment. It's like, why? Because somebody called you out? Like, let people call you out. There's this whole idea, it's like transparency. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to be devoted to transparency, be transparent. But don't say I'm, transparent through a rose-colored lens, and I just have to delete everything else that doesn't fit in there. And if your teachers really don't handle criticism well at all, or have to create some kind of thing like, oh boy, here I go, create some kind of thing where it's like, well, the reason why people have been calling me out on being an absolute fucking creep is because there's a splinter hairline fracture in the fifth density of the other thing. And ever since I bypassed creation, it just seems like everybody's going through some major like shadow working shifts, and I'm not wrong. And you're like, fuck, like, damn it. It's like, oh, well, everyone else has to be wrong except for you. Like, we all make mistakes sometimes, and that's how we learn. It's just a rugged day on the loom. But, if you have a teacher that has a hard time accepting criticism and has to say that like everybody else is wrong except for them. Also, like, if a teacher is talking about somebody having bad energy, close the book and go, because you can't have a teacher that's talking about mirroring and say somebody else has bad energy. And you get into a really fucking tricky zone. Anytime that you write somebody off because they have bad energy, aka a huge assumption that you've made about them, with some huge, their bad energy is a punishment for how they're living our life. Like, you're creating an entire book of judgment about somebody. And every time you judge somebody else, you open, like, think about so let's say you're trying to judge me right now. Imagine that you've created a road that you think goes from your mind to my mind, a one-way road of judgment. But what you don't realize about judgment is that when you build that road, I can drive on it in the opposite direction. Every time you point your finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. So when you create a judgment about me, it's actually a two-way street. And no matter how refined the judgment is, oh, she's got cancer because she did this thing up, or even something like she's got stretch marks because she didn't put coconut oil on. You create a clear line, a clear path of vulnerability straight to your own mind, and you're literally attacking yourself. So if you just never try and build that bridge of judgment from your mind and attach it to somebody else, nobody's going to be able to put that shit on you. And you can be absolutely bulletproof to the opinions, judgments of others. How other people feel about me does not dictate at all how I feel about myself anymore, but it used to, and my entire life used to rely on that. But it's only when you stop judging other people that you won't be so damn paranoid that people are judging you. So if you're saying that somebody has bad energy, and this is so fucking dangerous to get into, yeah, some huge assumption that I can't see, it's just this like world of judgment. That's witch hunting. Like, you can just straight up, oh, that person's got bad energy, that person's got a demon, that person's got a bad vibe, that person's got this, that person's got that. And it's like, oh, so you with your like magical third eye of judgment, like if somebody's talking about bad energy, take it as a really big red flag, because everybody's just reflecting what you're projecting onto them. And I don't care how different this person seems than you. If you spot it, you got it. And that's never not going to be true. So, also, our teachers throwing, this is why I try not to talk about stuff on this until I'm very practiced, because I don't want to throw other teachers under the bus, because they're just like reflecting me, but I see some of this stuff coming up and I'm like, ugh, and it's always, and I have to go back and do like the questions with myself, be like, okay, how is this showing me a part of me? How could this be me? But man, I've just seen such whack shit with spiritual teachers in the last little bit where I'm just like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about transparency? You're like the most covert person out there, or your transparency when it comes to completely dragging somebody else through the mud, but then you keep like your own shit. Transparency through a rose-colored lens is not transparency. You started to be very vocal about my experience with the Cult Like group. Yeah, cool. And it's being turned around that my experience is a projection of where my own work is. Yeah, totally. I mean, cults are very easy to join. And honestly, if Patrick and I hadn't been so forcibly ejected from his last living situation, we would have totally ended up in because it's not very hard to start a cult. Like, all you need to start a cult is somebody in charge. When they're like, nobody's in charge, there's always somebody in charge. And when you can't handle criticism, and this idea of like, if you're a bad apple, you're out there like, I got fucking sexually assaulted by the like elder at the lodge, and they told me that it was because I had bad energy and that Patrick had bad energy. And I was like, well, come at me, bitch, like outside, basically, which actually isn't how it went down at all. But we got like excommunicated and exiled from this and we're so grateful for it now, because we're like, that's a cult. I love that you two people know each other. So hi, Michaela. Michaela, I'm looking forward to Wednesday, catching up, hopefully be there. It'll be a short one. We have the very last episode of Wheels. And then, I know it's going to be over. Does anyone have any questions about Tantra? Does anybody have any questions about, cults? Basically, if you just want to make sure that you don't join a cult, just make sure that that you have all the wisdom that you could ever need. And psychic powers, ESP, there are people that are very, very practiced, and definitely people that came here with like very heightened natural gifts. But if they're like, I can see something that you can't see, and that person has bad energy, and that's why I'm deleting their comments off of my Facebook group, my tribe. All right, bye. And any, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm excited to catch up on Wednesday, and then we'll have another catch up when you, whenever you get settled. Michaela's going to be going to Italy. So exciting. So, I'm just going to wait a few more minutes to see if anybody has any questions on here. But, if you have, also, like, a lot of teachers got to where they are by asking really difficult questions. like by challenging their teachers. Like I was reading Stephen Hawking's Wikipedia page, which is fascinating. You know that Stephen Hawking was like shit in school. He was like shit in school. He did terrible at school. But most teachers that really like left legacies at some point were a little like punk ass student that asked a question, be like, well, why the fuck does it have to be so hard? Or why do you feel that way? They presented criticism that led to a greater exploration of truth. Like questions lead you to solidify the truth, to either affirm or adjust what it is that you know to be true. And so like coming against questions, coming against criticism is like the super highway to expansion. So if a teacher is not soliciting any of that, if a teacher is not taking any criticism or deleting it and not just engaging in it, then that's when as a teacher, you have to be learning all the time. All the time. So if you're not taking criticism, you're saying, oh, it's because I know it all. And therefore I don't need to stoop to your like level of negativity to indulge this, where it's like, this person's just spreading a rumor about me. Yeah, well, if you want to have 50,000, 500,000 people watching your shit, there's going to be some people that just like troll, that just like troll stuff. And, maybe people are just spreading rumors about you. But if you are deep in your heart chakra and you can accept all possible realities about yourself and just love yourself, it doesn't matter what they say. And you won't be so insecure that one person posting a freaking rumor about you is going to destroy your whole career. Don't worry about that. But I just think that it's a super big red flag when people can't handle negativity, because like they're only showing you something that you're insecure about or something that you've like suppressed, disowned, and denied for so long. So please welcome the criticism, because if you're not welcoming the criticism, in my opinion, you've stopped learning. And when you've stopped learning, you've stopped teaching. So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm sorry for the late start today. I'm trying my best to be more consistent about stuff with Bruja. And right now it feels like a fucking shit ton of work because I'm doing a newsletter and Bruja is usually really passive for me, but something, I just kind of do it whenever I want. But something that I've really been trying to master recently is like, how can I be as precise as possible? And how can they're doing okay. We have to go back to the vet on Thursday. I think my little girl got bit by a spider on her vagina. I know, what's that reflecting on me? She's so fucking chill for having this like huge like wound right next to her crotch that like abscessed and terrible. They're rescue dogs from the reservation, and so but they, it's been a lot of trips to the vet and we have to go back again. But she's like so chill. I'm like, I'd be losing my shit. I mean, I guess like my dog can't Google, and that's probably why I lose my shit. But I'm like, you've got like a huge thing on your vagina. I'm always trying to think about like, how can I add more value? How can I create more consistency? And, if you're wanting to run any kind of business, consistency is really important. Now, I'm not somebody that loves discipline whatsoever, but I also, if it was Tantra, if it was red Tantra, it'd be like, well, why do anything ever? And if it was Kundalini, it's like, if you're not showing up for your deadlines every day, then you're not, transcending into whatever the fuck, your radiant body isn't showing sufficiently, but I'm really trying to be more precise about what it is that I do. Indigo, I'm excited about Wednesday. It's our last wheels. And so, yeah, all right. Well, this was a perfect little wrap up. If you're just catching on at the end of this broadcast, today's broadcast was about Tantra. Indigo, you and I have already talked about this. So it's everything that we've already talked about Tantra. But maybe, I don't know, every time I talk about something, it gets a little more added onto it. But, just remember that you can't make a wrong turn. Your life is a tapestry. Even if you're feeling so bad about some days, it's like, why are you so convinced that it's got to be, perfectly uniform to be beautiful? Why do you think that it has to be this way in order to be beautiful? If you let it be exactly what it is, it'll become more beautiful than you could have imagined. And it's already beautiful. So let it be beautiful. That's what Oshun, the Orisha, told me. And when I was swimming in Barton Springs years ago, just let it be beautiful. All right, guys. I love you so much. I bring you all the love that you need on this trip, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.